Have you ever thought about how a single year can literally define the next 10? I know, it sounds a little dramatic, right? But sometimes all these massive forces just slam together at the perfect moment to create a turning point. Well, today, we're going to dive into why 2026 is shaping up to be exactly that for the 2030s. So let's get right into it. Why 1 year? How can it be that important? Well, it's because 2026 looks like it's going to be what we call an inflection point. Think of it as a moment where all these huge, long-term trends in the economy, in technology, and in society all hit this critical peak at the exact same time, basically rewriting the rulebook for everyone. And the decisions we make around this point, they don't just matter a little bit. They set the entire stage for who wins and who gets left behind for years and years to come. So here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about this inflection point. Then, we'll break down the four massive forces that are creating it: a labor crisis, a tech revolution, a new kind of consumer, and some serious economic headwinds. And then, we'll tie it all together to show you why 2026 is basically your last best shot to get ready. Okay, let's get straight to the big idea here. The 2030s might feel like they're a long way off, but the conditions that are going to define that entire decade, they're locking into place right now. And 2026 is the moment it all clicks. It's when the future, for all intents and purposes, decides to show up a few years early. What's so powerful about this idea is how it frames the stakes. We are not talking about making small little adjustments here. It means the choices leaders make around 2026, not in 2030, but right now, are going to determine if their businesses are leading the pack or if they're going to be stuck playing a desperate and probably losing game of catch-up. All right, let's get into the first major force, and this one is a big deal. We are looking at a historic shift in our workforce. This isn't just some temporary blip on the radar. It's a huge, long-term challenge that's about to hit a whole new level of crazy. And this chart, wow, it just lays the problem out perfectly. See that giant bar on the left? By 2026, the biggest wave of baby boomer retirements is going to be in full swing. But at the exact same time, look at that smaller bar in the middle. The core group of workers is actually shrinking. There just aren't enough new people, that's the tiny bar on the right, to fill that massive gap of experience that's walking out the door. So, what does this actually mean for companies? Well, it means way fewer qualified people applying for jobs. It means wages are going to be under intense pressure, and the competition for good talent is going to be fierce. And here's the kicker. You're losing decades of know-how, that institutional knowledge that walks out the door with every single retiree. The old ways of hiring and staffing, they're just not going to cut it. Now for our second force, technology. The entire way we talk about tools like AI and automation is changing, and is changing fast. We are blowing past the what-if stage and sprinting headfirst into the how-to stage. And honestly, it's happening way faster than most organizations are ready for. This slide really nails the mindset shift we all need to make. Just a couple of years ago, AI was emerging tech. It was interesting, something to experiment with, a thing for the future. By 2026, it becomes an expected capability. It's going to be part of the basic toolkit you need just to compete, kind of like how you just have to have a website today. So here's the bottom line on this. If your business isn't seriously weaving these tools into everything you do by 2026, you're risking falling 2, maybe even 3 full productivity cycles behind your competition. And trust me, that is not a gap you want to be trying to close later on. All right, let's talk about the third force, and this one is huge. Who's got the money? We are right in the middle of this massive generational transfer of economic power, and it's going to completely reshape what customers expect from every single business out there. I mean, just look at these numbers. By the late 2020s, Millennials and Gen Z are going to control almost 60% of all consumer spending. These are people who grew up with the internet in their pocket. They're digitally native, so their expectations are just wired completely differently. Bending to their needs isn't optional, it's literally the key to survival. So what do they actually want? It's a whole new playbook. They expect flawless digital experiences, like buying a car entirely from your couch on your phone. They demand crazy levels of personalization. Think about how Netflix just knows what you want to watch next. They want total transparency, and they love the convenience of subscriptions. Your clunky old-school sales process, yeah, that's not going to fly anymore. And all of this is happening with another storm brewing on the horizon, which brings us to our fourth and final force, the long-range economic outlook. Because while businesses are trying to deal with all these other changes, the forecasts are telling us we should probably be battening down the hatches for some rough seas toward the end of the decade.
And here's the thing. If companies wait until 2028 or 2029 to try and get resilient, they're going to be reacting smack dab in the middle of a crisis. And that is way, way too late. The time to reinforce the ship is before the hurricane hits, not while you're being thrown around by 20-foot waves. This leads to this really powerful idea called proactive resiliency. And this is not just about playing defense, trying to survive. This is an offensive strategy. It's about using the calm weather now to get so lean and so strong that when a downturn hits, it actually becomes your moment to grab market share while everyone else is just trying to stay afloat.
Okay, so let's put all the pieces together. We've got a historic labor shortage, a massive tech tipping point, a new consumer majority in charge, and some big economic pressure on the way. When you stack all those up, they point to one single, unavoidable conclusion. I absolutely love this metaphor of a runway year. Just picture a giant airplane. It needs a really long runway to build up enough speed to take off, right? Well, 2026 is that last stretch of open pavement. It's your final, best chance to build that critical momentum before all these forces come together and the world just gets a whole lot more complicated. So what's the playbook? What do you actually do? It really comes down to these 5 things. To fight the labor shortage, you have to automate and use AI smartly. To keep the knowledge you've got, you have to invest in your people. To win over this new customer, you've got to totally overhaul their experience. And to handle that economic storm, you build that proactive resiliency by getting your finances in order right now.
You know, when you boil it all down, it's a pretty stark choice. Businesses can use this time now to get ahead of the curve and set themselves up for a decade of growth. Or they can wait. And if they wait, they're going to find themselves desperately trying to catch up in a world that has already left them in the dust.
The forces that we've talked about today, they're not just possibilities. They are already in motion, accelerating towards that critical point in 2026. And that really just leaves one last question for every leader, for every company, and really for every single one of us to think about. The 2030s are coming. The real question is, will you be ready?